Hello, this is TA Miniature to introduce Project 2. Continuing from the last project, we will deal with the active electric model. There are three main things to cover in this assignment. First, analysis of strength and durations of current generating action potential based on SD relationship. Second, calculate the conductance of the channel through the rate equation. And lastly, understanding of the Hodgkin-Huxley model. In this project, you should be able to see the result using like MATLAB, Python, C, or C++, but I recommend MATLAB, and I'm sure most of you are using it, but I will let you know how to install it for those who haven't used it. And first, go to Helmut on our school homepage and click the software button. In the language section, click the button labeled MATLAB Campus License, and then click the blue letters in the third step of how to use license. And then you will see the download window provided by this school will appear, and you can just log in and get download. So let's start with a brief review of the Hodgkin-Huxley model. The Hodgkin-Huxley model is the mathematical model that simulates the electrical properties of neurons and cardiac cells. It is based on the ion channel properties and the mechanism that control their opening and closing. Looking at the brief chronology, Hodgkin and Huxley started their first research in 1935, and in 1939, they succeeded in experimenting with giant axons and published the research in Nature. After World War II broke out, they published their research about 7 years later and finally won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1963. So this is the paper from Hodgkin-Huxley published in 1952. It has been cited about 27,000 times so far. And in this paper, for the first time, the view that change in the conductance of calcium and potassium generated the action potential of neurons was implemented as a mathematical model. So as we learned in our class, the Hodgkin-Huxley model can make a simple equivalent circuit. At this time, the resistance value of each ion channel are expressed as a kind of differential equation by the conductance change. The rate equation can be said to express the mechanism by which ionic conductance is controlled here. In this formula, dNdt is the increased amount of particles in the open state. And if the membrane potential is low, it means that the rate of going from the closed state to the open state is low. And if the membrane potential is high, it means that the rate of going from an open state to a closed state is low. And you can get better understand if you review Module 5. Okay, so now let me explain the project. So this project is that when we actually inject current into the membrane, at this time when current flows inward, and when this is read as a voltage pump, an action potential will be generated. This is the problem that requires interpreting this phenomenon using the Hodgkin-Huxley model and driving the result. So the first problem is the problem of deriving Hodgkin-Huxley's basic differential equation. And brief explain with pictures. It is a problem to make how the membrane potential changed when current is put into the equilibrium circuit. So to give you a simple hint for the implementations of this Hodgkin-Oxley model, this differential equation can be obtained by simply applying KCL law, Kirchhoff law, similar to what we did in project 1. And in this problem, you have to draw how the membrane potential changed over time when the current source is entered. We can see there's something on programming, and for those problems, you can programming in MATLAB, Python, C, or C++, and please submit the code along with the report, please. And to solve this problem, we need a boundary condition. In this case, I put on some boundary condition. When t is 0, the rates of change of n, m, and h can be set to 0 for their solution with respect to time. So keep in mind this, please. And in 2.2 problem, when the action potential is drawn, we have to distinguish the depolarization area and the repolarization area. And I will show some demo graph later. And finally, show how sodium and potassium are related to this result. I will show this graph also later. And for this, the conductance of sodium and potassium must be plotted too. And finally, 2.3, it is a problem to directly measure the threshold of the action potential. You may have learned in class that depending on the pulse width, so you can draw a strength relation curve. From the pulse width of 100 microsecond to 2 milliseconds, and it is divided this step by 100 microseconds. From this result, please draw the SD curve graph. This is the demo video. When the current enters like this, you can make a membrane potential follow the action potential shape like that. Yeah, and of course, you don't have to make a video like this, but you have to print this graph. In addition, please also separate the depolarization area and the repolarization area too. And please discuss how these two areas, in other words, the cell membrane potential state, are related to the change in conductance of sodium and potassium ions over time, respectively. And that is all. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.